Devon, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. Excited.
Yeah, this is, we've talked about this for a minute, but I'm glad that we can actually do this in person because we're both in Arizona. And I don't know about you, but there's a different vibe when you're in person versus just like a Zoom. It's just like, it never works out. So I'm really glad that we can do it in person.
Yeah, in person's way better for sure.
Yeah. So, okay. I feel bad. I was saying this before the podcast. I feel like, I've heard your story so many times, but I've probably also listened to a bunch of different episodes, talking about your experience with the NFL, and it's a really captivating story. So I'm excited to recount it. But if you're getting bored of like talking about that over and over, okay. We'll give. I'm sure the audience, they probably have heard your background a little bit because it is a really cool story. But go ahead and introduce yourself and give us your background.
Yeah. So my name's Devon Kennard. I'm a 9-year NFL veteran. I played from 2014 to 2023 is when I officially retired from the NFL. Went to USC for college, got my undergrad and master's degree. And I guess my claim to fame in the real estate and what led into private lending is the fact that as soon as I got drafted in the NFL, I started buying single family properties, and that scaled. At the most, I got up to 50 units, but then I also started investing passively in syndications as a limited partner. So, for those that don't know, I was pretty much just putting my money into bigger deals, and just, taking my coupons, dividends, and the profit split. And I was doing that for a while and throughout my career. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm getting close to retirement. I built a good network. I've written a book with Bigger Pockets, which is a big real estate network and all of that. So I had a few contacts, and they're like, would I lend to them on a project? And I lent to them on a project, had no idea what I was doing. Did second position loan. Really, it was knowing what I know now is really unsecured. But what I did early on was I picked good operators, and the deals made sense. I was already a real estate investor, so my mindset early on was like, show me why the deal makes sense. Show me that you have enough cash to solve for problems, and then trying to be a good judge of character of who I do business with. So I won on that end, but the structure was awful. Did a few of those loans, loved it, and then that kind of led into me starting my company, 42 Solutions, as soon as I retired in 23. But yeah, so that's kind of the quick summary of it.
Okay. There's something that I want to dive into, and I was actually listening to your podcast that you did, the Action Academy podcast with Brian.
Oh yeah.
And you were talking about, and I thought this was super interesting. You were talking about NFL pay, and everyone boasts these humongous, gigantic contracts. Like the other day I was looking at Kirk Cousins, now he's second string on the Falcons, whatever, but he's got a 4-year, $180 million contract, which people are just like, whoa, mind blown.
Yeah.
But you said something really interesting, and I was like, I didn't even believe it. Can you go over like pricing and how contracts work?
Yeah. So, let's call a spade a spade. 4-year, $180 million. He's making a lot of money, but it's never as much as what people actually assume, because even if he was seeing that whole 180, half of it's going from taxes. We're taxes W-2 employees.
Brutal.
And so we're getting hit over the head with taxes in the worst way. And there's no way really around it to, pay less in taxes. And then we pay our agents 3% of gross. Oh. So, it's not net. So he's paying his agent 3% of gross revenue. Now, with a contract that big, maybe he was able to negotiate 2% or what have you, but you get the point. So when you factor in taxes, which is obviously on gross, and then agent fees, you're literally about 47, depending on, I got drafted in New York, I was seeing about 47 cents on the dollar when it was all said and done. Yes. So not that's, in his case, that's still 90 million, but 90 million is not 180. Like, so you start to scale that down, and you see a guy sign a 3-year, $20 million contract, and that's 10 million. Like when it's all said and done, maybe a little less. Now, 10 million is still a lot of money.
Sure.
But if that's the most they're ever going to make in their life, and they don't really have a plan after they're done playing, $10 million can go, especially if you've built an expensive lifestyle. You buy a house, your mama house, got a couple cars, all these different factors. Like, although 10 million is a good chunk of money, that can go when you got to span it out over the next 30, 40, 50 years. So I think that's a really important component. So I think people get kind of jaded. And then another piece in it is it's only the guaranteed money that matters. So Kirk Cousins is savvy. So I think most, if not all of that 180 might be guaranteed. I don't know.
I think it's only 2 years guaranteed.
So
So
in that case, really, he's not seeing all the guarantee. He's not seeing all that 180. Like, he's only seeing what's guaranteed. So I've done a YouTube video before where it was like a 3-year, $10 million $10 million contract can turn into $3 million quickly, because like, let's say the year 1 and year 2, you're supposed to make $6 million, and then year 4, you're making $4 million. So 3, 3, 4. Well, the third year is not guaranteed. So if you're overperforming and you're balling out on the football field, most likely what's going to happen is they're like, we get to keep him for a third year for $4 million when he's really worth $10 million.
Discounted rate.
And that's where guys get upset, and that's where you see guys holding out. I'm worth $10 million. I'm only making $4 million this year, and they're saying you're under contract for $4 million. Tough luck.
Yeah.
Now, if the opposite happened, if you, in those first 2 years, you faced an injury, you're not playing very well, maybe they want to move on, maybe they drafted somebody else, they can just cut you.
Yeah.
And now that third year you're not getting. So all of a sudden a 3-year, $10 million contract really is a 2-year, $6 million contract, then cut that in half.
Ooh.
So all of a sudden a 3-year, $10 million contract actually looks like $3 million for that player actually in his pocket. Now, again, I'm not trying to say $3 million
Sure.
isn't a lot of money, but what if that's the last contract or the only contract that guy gets? That's not really going to sustain him for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So I think that is the conflict that people don't understand about NFL, the contracts, and how it's all structured. So I always, like, when I see it on Sports Center ticker, like, what's the guaranteed and what's the situation? You got to kind of know the specifics, because sometimes those numbers pop out at the screen at you, but they're not always what they seem.
Well, that's the first place that my mind went when I saw that, $180 million contract. He's like, right now he's the highest paid second string quarterback in the league. But if he's not performing well, then guess what? He's probably not, going to get renewed. And so I was like, yeah, okay, $180 million, but you take 30% of that. And like, again, not that it's not a lot of money, but that's a huge haircut. Huge haircut.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, kind of keeping that in mind and in perspective. And that's why I always talk to players about, like, man, don't count your eggs before they hatch. What's guaranteed?
Yeah.
Cut it in half, and then make sure you're building your life off of that number. And if you end up outperforming it, let that be cherry on top, because now you get another contract or what have you. But, just betting that those checks are going to keep rolling in forever is unique. And one thing I don't think I've shared on another podcast, a lot of people don't know, we get paid in 17 weeks. So think about how big those checks are for 17 weeks, the whole year's salary. So if I'm making $10 million this year, I'm really making $10 million over 17 weeks. So cash management for these players can become like, think about how big those checks are. Let's just say it's $17 million you're making this year. That's $1 million a week for 17 weeks. So it's easy to just be like, I want that, I want that, I want that, and not realizing you got to kind of span that across the entire
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, the entire year. And
it's not like a school teacher where they space it out over the course of the year.
No.
I'm surprised they don't do that.
So we can check in, and now there's players who will do it over 34 weeks instead of 17, because it's been a struggle for a lot of players with cash management and stuff. But even 34 weeks, you're not getting paid year round like a W-2 job. We really work for those 17 weeks. So outside of signing bonus, when you sign and you get that right away, your actual salary is paid over the season. So those weekly checks can be crazy, but it leads to overspending, because when you're getting a huge check and your mom wants a house and you just
you got money come out of your ears.
So the psychology of money really starts to tap into where, like, can you be prudent with your capital when you're seeing a huge amount of money come in and know that same amount's coming next week too?
Yeah. It's funny because I was listening to an interview with George Kittle, and he was they were talking about something else, but in passing he said, oh yeah, I flew my mom in on the PJ for Thanksgiving, or whatever, I mean, that's great, and clearly the dude's doing just fine, but you do that too often, and you have some serious problems.
It adds up. So, you got to factor those things in, and it's like, there's some guys, I would say guys are making enough money where there's some guys that can get away with the PJ life for a good while, as long as they're doing it within relative reason. Mm-hmm. There's some guys making enough money where they can rationalize, the PJ life. But when you're doing it in excess for a long time, I almost don't care how much you make. Like, there's ways to spend it. If you're doing PJs and mansions and cars and jewelry and like that, those things start to stack up for sure.
Yeah. So kind of a segue off that. We were at the Paper Trail conference a couple weeks back, and you said something to me that actually it stuck out to me. the way that I can't remember exactly what you said, but the way that you were talking about your life in the NFL, you instinctively knew that it was going to come to an end. I could just tell that, like, even though this whole time you were in the NFL, you kept saying, when I retire or when this happens, and you just always had that outlook. I imagine, and I could be wrong because I've never played in the NFL, but I imagine that there's a lot of egos, there's a lot of arrogance, there's a lot of, I'm never going to get hurt, I'm the best of the best. Is that true, or is that just kind of in my own?
I think it's definitely true, and it's needed to an extent. You got to have a little bit of ego, a little bit of confidence. It's hard to be successful in a room full of alphas and everyone is trying to feed their family. The environment is incredibly competitive, and people don't always understand that. But like, I can have a bad game on Sunday, and on Monday they're bringing in outside linebackers, which is a position I played, to try out, and who else do we want to sign? They're trying to replace you. Who could we trade for? So having that pressure, but how I relate it to everyday life and other people, other listeners, is like, that's the case in the real world, in business, in entrepreneurship, it's just not as in your face as it is in the NFL. Like I mentioned, in the NFL, I have a bad game, I'm probably seeing outside linebackers getting worked out the next day. In business, it's not as direct. You don't
see them over here.
You don't see them over. But if you're running your own private lending shop, there's another company trying to take your market share. If you're a W-2 employee, there's a manager that's like, this person's underperforming. Like, who else could we be hiring? What direction should we be going? So when you have the mindset of they're always trying to replace you, it puts you in a perspective of like, how do I make sure I'm protecting myself with or without this job? And that's the mindset I always had. And I have it more so because my dad played in the NFL too. He played for 13 years, won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys. So but growing up, I saw my dad most post his football career. So it gave me a good perspective. And I'll never forget, I was at like the rookie symposium when I got drafted, and it was Eddie George, and he said, begin with the end in mind. And I've held that, since that day, because it was something I already had in me because of my dad. But I loved that kind of phrase of like, when I'm starting in the NFL, understanding that it's one day going to end, it changes and dictates the decisions I make, and I'm preparing for that end. So what's hard is, can you excel at your job to the maximum of your ability in the moment while also preparing for the fact that it's going to end one day and you need to be prepared? That is a hard juxtaposition that you're in, but I think it's mandatory, especially playing professional sports. But I would argue every person with a job, whether you have a W-2 job or you're a business owner or what have you, how do you set up your business and your financials in a way where you're excelling as much as you can in what you're doing, but you're preparing for the tides to turn and for you to need to, sustain your life for your family in the future.
Right. So is that kind of where the role of real estate came in? Like, that was my backup plan because I don't know how long this is going to work or how long.
Yeah. So I really, what happened is, I knew I wanted to start investing, and I had the idea of real estate already. Actually, I'll share that story. It was like I just tore my pec. I was at USC. I was getting ready for my senior year. I was like balled out. I'm stoked, like really jacked up, running fast. And it was a week before my senior year, and training camp was around the corner, and I was bench pressing 435, and I came down for the fourth rep. So I did it 3 reps already, and the fourth rep, and I tear the pec off my bone. My whole pec rolls into my chest. So I have to redshirt as a senior. I'm freaking devastated. I'm pissed. All my friends, I'm supposed to ball out this year, go to the league with my friends, and turn my career around. I had a lot of injuries throughout college, and now I got another injury, and it's a pec. So I missed the year, and it actually put me in a position to get my master's degree. I ended up graduating with my master's and going to the NFL. So it worked out, but in the moment, I'm not thinking about that.
Right.
So I started like doing a lot of networking, and I meet with this guy, and he was a real estate investor in LA where USC was. And I'll never forget, I was super excited for the meeting. I wore a suit and tie, got all fancy, and I walk into his office, and he had what I would have called an equivalent to a Lululemon like sweatsuit on, like.
Okay.
And then it was the first time I ever saw one of those moving desks that like. So he was standing up. So I'm like freaking didn't sleep the night before, like excited about this meeting. And this dude's in like a sweatsuit and at a stand-up desk, like looks so unserious. And he begins to tell me his story and everything. And the guy owned over 6,000 units in LA and had his own property management company that managed it all and others. So managed almost 14,000 units and owned 16,000, and was telling me about his lifestyle and things like that. And that's when it was like, if he could do it, I can do it, because he started off with a police officer's salary and bought one house and house hacked it and then got a duplex, and then he just kept stacking up. And I'm like, if he's able to do that off a police officer's salary, whether I make it in the NFL or not, I can do that. So I had the idea of real estate. I get into the NFL, and in the NFL locker room, everybody was talking about the stock market at the time. Like that's what most guys had, a financial advisor, and it was stocks. So I kind of followed the herd initially, and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. Veterans that I respect are doing this. But almost immediately, I hated the volatility. And I was a 5th round draft pick. I didn't know how long I was going to play. All the articles are saying like, oh, he might be a special teams guy, might not make it in the league, all this stuff. And I knew I was better than that. And I just had coming off an injury, I just needed the right opportunity, but I needed to prepare, begin with the end in mind. And I'm like, I want to get to $10,000 a month in cash flow. If I can do that, I'm 22 years old. I'm going to be able to get a nice apartment. I'll be able to drive a nice car. Like $10,000 will do it for me. Yeah. Like at that point. So I was like, you know what? This stock market thing's not doing it for me. I'm going to start buying rentals. So that's where I started like buying rentals. And hindsight, I wish I was buying in Arizona, where we are now. But I thought the market, so my background was Arizona, LA, and New York, all expensive markets. So I started buying in the Midwest, and the numbers penciled great there. I was buying stabilized assets for around $100,000, but I was charging $1,300, $1,400. So, talk about the 1% rule, you're way above that. So I was rocking with that and just started scaling up in those in the Midwest, in Kansas City, Ohio, Tennessee, and I was buying units there. And then that's where I kind of got my start. And I started to understand like, how to look at a portfolio and leverage and debt and all these different things. And it just kind of snowballs from there. And I fell in love with it.
It's interesting because I see a lot of parallels between your story and mine, obviously not in the NFL, but you talked about these numbers, which are very like eerily similar to my numbers. Like my goal was $10,000 a month. And at our peak, I think we had like 45 doors or so, and that was kind of like, I've shared this story many times on the podcast, but we got to a point where I was looking at my QuickBooks once, and I was like, my goal was always $10,000 a month. And I looked, and 1 month we'd surpassed it. And I missed it. We were like $12,000 a month. And I was like, I was thinking it was going to be this humongous euphoric experience. And deep down, I was kind of just like, I don't know if I like this, and it wasn't the money. It was just kind of like what it represented. Like I had all these units, all these roofs, all these water heaters, and just the mental load, at least for me. And I think is probably, I just wasn't cut out for it. But what was kind of that pivotal moment when you're like, I don't know if I want to like acquire more doors and I want to switch over into private lending, or even was it at that point? Was there like another moment that happened?
So I had two points. So I was just doing those, buying single family at first. And then I started to get into syndication investing because I was like, I can't, even though I had property managers in all the cities I was buying in, it's like I can't buy fast enough. As I started to hit new contracts and grow money, I'm like, I can't allocate it into enough properties fast enough. And the overhead, like learning how to like, even though I'm not managing them, I'm managing the managers and dealing with making sure I'm not getting screwed. It was starting to become a lot when I was approaching 50, and I'm like, to keep reaching new goals, I got to get to 100, and then 100, like, and I'm like, do I want 200 doors and like chaos almost,
right?
And so much I'm managing. So that's why I started first investing in syndications, where I'm like, a standard syndication is like, a multifamily property, and I'm going to get an 8% preferred return and a 15 to 18% IRR on my money over the life of the deal, a 70-30 split. So I get 70 of the profits. The GP running is going to get 30. That made a lot of sense to me. I did a lot of those investments, and they worked out well for me. But what I didn't like about those was I had zero control. Right. So I couldn't refinance when I wanted. I wasn't the one making the debt decision and make sure it's structured properly. So I realized that I liked control. So then I was like, all right, this is cool, but that's not what I really want either. And that's what led me to private lending, because I'm like, I get to control, like if I control the capital, I get to control what deals I fund, how I fund them, how much I fund, how creative I do or don't want to be. And once I started to see that and then the returns, and I started to go back and look at syndication investing and owning real estate, and it's like the numbers weren't comparing to what you can get in lending. Like I own this real estate, especially when I started looking at it in 2022, 2023, I'm like, things are more expensive. That 1% rule wasn't happening. I got to buy that same property for 200 and something.
Right.
And it's still only renting for like 1,400. So now it's flipped, and I'm not buying for 100 and renting it for 1,400. I'm buying it for 200 plus and renting it for almost that same number. So I'm like, once I did the math and realized that I would run out of money before I hit my next financial goals because things weren't cash flowing the same level. And then once I started to see the lack of control in syndications, it started to turn me off against both of them. And I just kind of fell into lending. And then I was like, this is it.
Yeah. So what was that first deal? Because typically I see a very natural progression, right? Like usually you're either on the traditional mortgage side, like you've been doing Fannie Freddie loans for years, and then you kind of get frustrated with, these are good deals, why are we like passing on them? And then you kind of move in that way. Or I see people who go from rentals to flipping into private lending. And so I don't think you fall into either of those traditional, like models. So what was it?
So how it kind of went down is I met my first borrower at like a conference. I go speak at a lot of conferences, and it was somebody who was well respected. I knew a lot of people that's done business with them and things like that. And we kind of hit it off. We had a relationship. We were kind of talking for a year, and then out of the blue, I met him at a conference like a year later, and he was like, "You want to just lend to me on a project? I'm looking for a new private lender." And I was like, "Well, what would that look like?" And started asking some questions, and I again had no idea what I was doing. So they dictated everything to me. Now I did get a nice return. Like I was charging 18%. So, like I was making really a good return, but it was essentially an unsecured loan because it wasn't even recorded. And they gave me the documents and the paperwork that they've used with other lenders that they've used before.
Right.
Cause I didn't really understand it.
Right.
So they showed me what the documents were, and all right, that sounds pretty good.
Which, by the way, I'm sure people know this, but like usually the lender calls the shots, not the other way around.
Exactly. So that it's humbling for me to admit that that's not how it went. But so they showed me all that, and then where I really dove into was like when they showed me the deal. I asked a lot of questions. I really understood the deal. Then their track record, I got to see a lot of their work. I talked to other people that worked with them before, had a good reputation, things like that. And then their financial background. That's something I like to look at a lot. Like how much cash availability do they have? I feel like that's a huge component on a successful, on somebody who can handle problems. Like if they don't have enough capital, then they hit problems, and the first thing they're doing is defaulting because they don't know they don't have any solution other than that. So, I had enough wherewithal to check those boxes at least, and did it. It funded, and I did loans with them I did like 6 or 7 loans with them over and over, and they were just going great. And then I added another borrower, and I got a little smarter, and I actually met with the attorney and drew my own loan docs, but that was still unsecured. I caught a lucky break. If anybody starting, don't do it how I started, how I started out. But my background of really looking at deals a lot and understanding that helped me. And then underwriting the borrowers, that's, I think, even today, I think that's my strong suit, and it has put me in a good position. And that worked out, and it kind of just segued. And in 2023, I was retiring, and I'm like, if I keep buying single family properties, I'm going to run out of money before I reach the next milestones that I want to reach financially.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so that's not what I'm going to do. And then I'm looking at the lending business and the compound effect and the velocity of money, and depending on how fast I turn loans and all of this. And I'm like, this could do it pretty easily. Like, so I'm going to lean into this. And then I read our friend Beth Johnson's book, Lend to Live. And that kind of gave me the structure of like, oh, I can kind of like systemize and really kind of perfect what I'm doing. And so I started to put those things in place and listening to other podcasts, reached out to Jason Balin and Chris Haddon over at Hard Money Bankers, and they talked with me and got into their community, and I just kind of took off from there.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, seriously, props to you. That's awesome. I love it. I love it. But on top of that too, I think whether it's scary regardless, right? Because you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, but like it applies in anything you're going to do. Like whether you're learning guitar or it's your first time in the gym or whatever, like obviously you make dumb, stupid mistakes, but it's really scary because you're talking about $600,000 on a project unsecured, which means they could, if they were unethical people, literally walk away. So I understand why a lot of people are intimidated by this because it's humongous sums of money. Was that ever like a concern to you, or was it just like, no, like good borrower, good collateral, I understand the way that real estate works and the process? Like, was there hesitation there, or was it just like, nope, this makes sense, I'm good to go?
No, there was definitely hesitation. And my first couple of loans were just like 100,000, 200,000, which not just, that's still a lot of money,
Sure.
but like I was scared to do anything over 300. I didn't do anything over 300 for a very, very long time. And then I was on top of my borrowers like crazy. Like I wanted my payments monthly, and I wanted to get updates on the projects. I wanted to make sure nobody was ever going dark on me. So, I was probably annoying, especially early on, because it's like I didn't want to be the athlete that's starting to lose his money
Right.
and getting screwed over. So I'm reaching out. If I didn't hear from them 1 month,
Give me an update. Give me an update.
I
Yep.
want pictures. I want videos. Like, so those are good things in lending practice in general. I was doing it from I'm scared as hell. Like, and I'm like, oh, that's actually what you should be doing. But I didn't do it. Like I was doing it because it's like, is what you're saying is happening actually happening?
Yes.
Show me,
Yep.
show me.
Yep.
So, but those are good things that are still within my business now that I'm actually, running it correctly. But I think there is something to be said about kind of like, I learn as much as I can, and you got to be willing to shoot your shot at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's scary what I was doing, but I was as prepared as I can be in that moment because I did know how to underwrite deals and I did know how to assess borrowers. And with the knowledge that I had at the time, I made the best decisions that I could. And $100,000 would have been pissed to lose, but at the time it wasn't going to completely end me.
That's fair.
So I felt like it was a good bet at that time. And I just got smarter and smarter, and the bets got smarter and smarter. So somebody out there, it's like, given your circumstances, you learn as much as you can and you educate yourself and you put yourself in a position. But there's so many people who are afraid to take action.
Yes.
And I've never been that. It's like, I'm going to do the dirty work of learning, and then I'm going to take action, but it's going to be action that could hurt me, but not kill me. Like $100,000 would have hurt me, but it's not going to kill me. And then I was on top of them and I did the best I could, and you learn and you stack. And I as embarrassing as the beginning of my journey is, knowing what I know now, I don't regret it because it's not like it wasn't well thought out and I was just gambling.
Sure.
I just didn't know what I didn't know, but I was intentional about it and I kept growing.
Well, and it's funny too, because now that you do it, it's not scary at all, right? And like, not that I shouldn't say it's not scary, but like you hedge your bets because you know that like, yes, this is a lot of money, but I have a recorded lien at the county courthouse. Mm-hmm. And in the event that something happens, I've got a significant equity cushion. So I can go through the foreclosure process, albeit that may be a massive pain in the ass. You know that like you will still be compensated justly for that risk, which like intuitively, when you think of it that way, you're like, oh, this is not that scary. If I'm lending $100,000 on a property that's worth $150,000 or $200,000, and I have that lien recorded, and even if I add in all the attorney's fees and the 6 months or a year of going through just legal process, like you'll still make money and you'll still be fine.
And when you understand that, that's huge. And I think what's a huge advantage for lenders like you and I, and I want to say we're true private lenders. And I want to add true,
yes,
because I feel like institutional lenders call themselves private lenders now, and it's not the same thing. But what's advantageous about you and I and our businesses is in our markets, if I had to, I have multiple exit strategies. I can fire sell, which is what most lenders will do. I can take over a project and finish the renovation. I'm holding back the reserves. I have contractors that I worked with all the properties I bought. My wife is an agent here. So I'm looking at it And it's like, I have multiple exit strategies that I can tap into. I also have a full borrowers list. That's somebody that I can sell it to unfinished or sell it to, like, so there's flexibility in what I can do. And I really understand and know my market. And I know your main market is Idaho. And even though you're not there anymore, you used to flip there.
Yep.
So it's no different for you. Like, it'll be a pain in the ass if you have to take over this project. But you have the same kind of exit strategies. You can look at it as like, do I want to fire sell it and get it off my hands quickly because I'm going to get my capital back? Or do I want to maximize it because there's an opportunity I can finish the renovation? I don't want to have to do that, but there's enough profit to where that might make sense. Like, so when you're small enough and really control the capital and you can make decisions like that, those are extra exit strategies. And like, you have to weigh your risk adjusted return off of your situation in your business. So what might be a little riskier to the bigger lender might not be the same risk profile for you and I.
Agreed. And I love that strategy too, because like, you're right. You have this, I'm going to date myself by saying Rolodex, but like, you have this big, long list of borrowers. And in the event that something happens, like you said, A, I've got the contractors, I can handle this myself, or B, maybe I just don't care. And I can say, hey, borrower, I have this property. And by the way, I'll give it to you on a silver platter. And by the way, do you need financing? I can help you with that as well. So like, again, really, really not all that scary.
And when you start to see it that way, like, I think your risk goes down further and further. And then I don't know how you structure, but I make my borrowers pay monthly.
Same.
So in Arizona, the deals are like larger size. They're paying a pretty penny every month. I charge 12% annualized, but if that's a $500,000, like
that's like $7,000
a 5 months, you've put it like, so you're just going to walk away from, like, that. People typically aren't going to do that. If they're in a really tough spot, they might have to, but for the most part, they had to put $60K down and they put another $50K in. They're probably not going to walk away, even if they're not going to get it all back.
Yeah.
But if they're in 150 and they got to finish it and get it sold to get 75 back, they're probably going to do it because getting 75 back is better than not getting.
Yeah. They're not walking away. Yeah. So there's something that I've been hearing a lot of as of late from like Alex Ramosi, Dan Martell. I assume you list all those guys, but they talk a lot about going pro. And I like that correlation, obviously, because you were pro in the NFL. But for me, it's been very much like, let's level up our game. Let's be professional. Let's do this in like a league of its own. Now, there was something that we talked about at the Paper Trail Conference that a lot of people were like very interested in. And it was in regards to the way that you structure the money that is being loaned to you from outside investors to your company. And I think a lot of people, for me, this was actually very eye-opening because a lot of people think, okay, there's really two models. There's the direct placement or like the co-lending model where you marry individual investors, whether one or multiple, to a loan. So say you have 123 Main Street for $100,000, you would go out and get, two investors at $50,000 or three investors at $33,000 to fund this loan. Or the other common method is to set up a fund where it's a big bucket of money, you pool all your investors together. You do kind of a hybrid of those, and a lot of people in the audience had questions about that. And I thought it was really interesting because it's not black and white. A lot of people think it's either this or this, but the way that you do it is unique. Can you go into all that?
Yeah. So I essentially, they lend to my business. So they're lending. I have an investor. Let's say they want to invest $100,000, and I give them the option. You can sign a participation agreement, so I have that paperwork, and you can participate in a single loan. I don't love that. And I kind of pitch it to them as like, it's fine. It connects you to one actual loan, but I'm paying you 10% annualized. But if that loan only lasts 4 months, you're getting in and out. You're not going to make, then I got to redeploy you into another loan. If there's a month in between, you're making a broken 10%. So that could end up really being 8.5. Like, sure. I can't tell you exactly what that will be. And we have to sign paperwork again, in and out. Like there's more movement. So that's the disadvantage of that. But if you want to be connected to an actual loan and feel more secure in that way, we can do a participation agreement. Another one is the signing a portion of it to them. So that's fine. I have paperwork to do that if I have an investor that's like really gung-ho. But how I raise capital primarily is through a promissory note, a loan agreement, and then an accredited attestation. And I work with Jurassic, I guess they're Fortra now. And Kevin Kim with the documents. I still file Reg D paperwork That was only a couple grand. And then I do Blue Sky in every state that I have investors, and they're essentially lending money to my business, and I owe them that capital regardless. So it puts pressure and onus on me. I'm fine with that. A lot of lenders are not okay with that because it's like, if I have defaults, I got to pay them anyways. One, cash reserves is really important to me, because if I'm ever dealing with defaults, I want to be in this game for a long time. I'm here for a long time, not a good time. So I want to be in business for a long time. So I like cash reserves. Also, in my case, majority of my lending balance sheet is personal capital. So I'm only doing loans I feel are going to pay back and pay. So I feel very good about the loans that I'm funding. So I don't mind having the responsibility to owe these my investors regardless, when I balance out cash reserves and my criteria of who I'm lending to and the deals that I'm lending to. So they essentially lend to the business. I use their capital, and it's an evergreen note. So I don't put an end date on it, and they love that because they invest. And if you tell me you want your capital back, I have a 6-month window. If they gave me $100,000 today, and they told me in a month they want their capital back, if I have the liquidity, which most of the time I do because I have a good cash reserves, I'll pay them back right away. But legally, I wanted to make sure I had at least 6-month window to pay them back, just in case all the capital is deployed in loans. Otherwise, they get to be in it as long as they want, and they're going to get, 10% annualized. So on $100,000, that's like $833.33 every month until they say they want different. They can also allow it to compound. So, I have a feature where I can just compound it. And then, so that means on $100,000, their account's just going up by $833.33 every month. So it gives the optionality, and I'm going to continue to raise money that way until a fund really matters. I do like the fund model, and you've kind of opened my eyes to ways you can do it to where it's not as extensive. But a lot of other people I talk to, they got fund managers and they're doing this, and it just seems like too much when majority of my capital base is personal capital. So I'm like, I want to be able to let family, friends, or other people get in that I build a relationship with over time, but I'm not necessarily trying to have my primary vehicle be a large fund. So putting the time, effort, and money into that doesn't make a ton of sense for me. So it works for my investors because I'm still an open book. I have audited financials. I have to go through an audit every year because in Arizona, you need your mortgage banker license. So if they want to see the audited financials, they can see the audited financials. If they want to see my book of loans, I have my whole loan tape that shows them the loans that I have. So it's not that I'm not trying to be transparent,
Sure.
but I want it as simple as possible. And I found, like you said, a little gray area to where like, this is legal. There's gray area in whether it's a security or not. So that's why I filed Reg D
Sure.
and did Blue Sky. Cause I'm like, if it's gray, I'm going to do what is right.
Yeah.
And I feel like doing that, but that works for me. And I think I've raised almost $1.5 million, and I think I'll do that at least till maybe 5 million. And then maybe after that, it might make sense to actually do the funds, but it works for my investors. Now the downside is it's technically an unsecured loan. So I'm fully transparent in that. But I'm like, you're lending to the business, and the business operation is lending to borrowers where there's personal guarantees and deeds of trust on every loan that's in our book of loans, which you can see if you want. So once I explain it all to them, most of the time, I have one investor that's done participation agreement. Every other investor I have has invested through the loan to the business, and I like it.
And that was going to be my next question, is like, what was that spread? But it sounds like the overwhelming majority are like okay with that.
Yeah,
that it's been.
They're okay with, and I think when you get more sophisticated and bigger investors, they're not going to like unsecured, like they're and I understand. Like I'm an investor too. I've invested in other things, like a lot of other things. I understand that juxtapoint. This is an alternative you have, but this is the downside. Like you're probably not going to get 10%, and there's going to be more paperwork, and there's more things. If you're fine with that and you want more security, here's this option. So that's the conversation that I candidly have with every investor, and I present both. I was like, I personally prefer, and all my investors have chosen this. This is why, but as it is an unsecured loan, and there's no reason for me to personally guarantee that when the business is personally guaranteed by all the book of loans.
Right.
So I'm not going to like doubly. If you want more security, we can talk about the other options. but these are the downsides of those options. And
well, you know what's funny though is it's kind of the same thing in a fund, right? So like for example, when we set up a fund, we set up a brand new LLC, and this is the fund LLC, and they're not really like, they are secured, but like they're still not physically secured. You know what I mean? Like they are, when they're investing in the fund, they're buying shares of the fund, and the fund owns, guess what? All of these pieces of property, which are secured with, you know, a first lien position, and it's recorded at the county courthouse, and you've got a deed of trust and all these different things. It's essentially the exact same thing that you're doing. It's just not as like formal as the fund.
yeah,
So honestly, in retrospect, if I had known that what you were doing was even an option, I probably would have done that instead of going the fund route. I just didn't know it was even an option back then.
yeah. And I kind of fell into it because I was trying to look for like my first investor or two was like friends and family, and they like, can I get in? And I was like, what's the easiest, best way to do this? And we know a lot of people who do the direct placement and I'm like the logistics of that. And it's like, I'm not at a place where I completely need a ton of other people's money. So to go through the hoops of doing that constantly, I'm like, I don't really want to do that.
Agreed.
Like, even my one participation agreement, I love him, but he wants to come with me when I go view the property and stuff. And it's like,
I ain't got time for that.
I'm like, bro, like you gave me $150K. The rest is my personal capital.
Yes.
I'm looking after our money. I promise.
Yeah.
Like,
I promise they give you $10K and they still want to come see the profit. You know, you're right.
Well, the loan he's in is a $2 million loan.
Okay.
And it's like,
yeah,
you gave me 150. The rest is mine. Like, trust me, I'm on these guys. Like, I'm gonna make sure that we're doing good here. Like, but I mean, at the same time, I get it. Like,
it's still 150 grand. Yeah.
Yeah. So I understand it, but it's just like to do that at scale, or like, you know, to want that level of communication and, hey, what's going on with our like?
Yes.
It's like, you know, let me show you the loans that I've done and that I'm doing, my overall business model, how I believe it's risk adjusted, and if you want to invest.
Yeah. I mean, you just set up those expectations beforehand, right? And you're like, you might hear radio, and I tell my investors from that, because like I'll say, you know, when we have a new investor that comes into the fund, I tell them, like, I'm very hands-on, I'm very upfront. Like, this is the paperwork, this is like the individual documents inside of like the PPM. So you've got the PPM, but you've also got the subscription agreement, the operating agreement. I lay it all out. But then what I will say, when they wire their funds to me, I will say, okay, I've received your funds. From here on out, it'll probably be radio silence from me outside of like me sending you your monthly statements, and that's it. And that is normal, and that's how it will be. Investing should not be like a sexy, exciting. It is like a very boring thing. Any point in time, you can reach out to me, ask me how things are going, but it's going to be pretty quiet. And that's how it is. And so I don't know if that's helpful, but at least for me, that's been very like setting up those expectations that like it's 6 month, a year loan, and like you might not hear from me, and that's okay.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, with how you've structured your fund and what you've done, like that really interests me, because what's made me want to put off a fund to where I absolutely need it is the expenses, and then it's seeming like so many people say like fund manager and then the extra accounting. But I'm like, even with the extra accounting, I already have to get audited. So I'm like, is the accounting even that much extra than what I'm already having to go through? So, you know, I can see when I don't know what that number is. 5's kind of in my head, 5 million, but I can see at one point I might need to do a fund, like, just because I know that's like the official, like, okay, it's all the way buttoned up. But I'll be reaching out to you at that time, because I would want to keep it simple. Like, I don't want over sophisticated thing.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be that complicated.
No, and I think that's how, I mean, we joked a couple weeks ago, like the reason that we moved to the fund in the first place was I hated playing matchmaker, you know, like, and I shared the experience on that other episode too, but you know, I hated it because it was my name on the line. And so like, I've told this borrower, yes, we can fund this deal. And then, so I reached out to all my investors and say, okay, you need to wire these funds on this date and this amount to this title company with these wire instructions. And I laid it out and made it super clear. And then the day would come and they wouldn't wire the funds and the borrower couldn't close. And it was my name on the line. And I hated it. It was just like this. I knew very quickly this structure is not going to work for me. And if this is required to be a private lender, I'm not going to be a private lender unless I'm doing 100% my own funds.
Yeah.
Which
and that's where I kind of like, for me, I've like set my business up, which has allowed me to grow, has made me grow slower, because I only fund what I know I can fund. So if I don't have investors that's already in, or I don't have the capital available myself, then I have to tell my borrowers no, which every time you tell them no, that you risk losing them. But I don't want to be in that position. Like reputation, I rather be like, hey, I only got so much capital because I'm a true private lender, and this is why. I'll have to let you know when I have the I'd rather have that conversation than like, oh yeah, I could do that, and then I can't.
Right.
Like I don't think you could really come back from yes and then reeling back into a no. Or like, I mean, obviously if you've had that, you can, but I didn't want to be in that position.
Agreed.
So it's like I have to say no up front at times when it's like, I don't think I have enough for that one, because somebody might hit me with $1 million loan and I only got like 450 or 500 I know is going to be available. I'm not going to put myself in a position where I'm freaking scrambling.
Well, I think borrowers respect that, right? They're like, because they want to know, like, is this going to get done for sure?
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say too is I wouldn't discredit yourself or discount yourself. The way that you're doing it now, it doesn't feel that like half-assed. I don't know what the word is, but like it still feels very legit to me. Like you've filed your Reg D, you're still doing blue sky state laws, and I mean, who knows? I don't know, but if you were to get audited by the IRS or the SEC or whoever. I think the intent is there that like, no, this guy's above board. Like he's doing it the right way. And
the fact that I'm audited, I think that's
huge,
because that audit process sucks and it's not cheap.
Yeah.
But it's kind of mandatory in Arizona. So it just is what it is. And it legitimizes me. So, that's a $15K.
Yeah. It's not cheap
expense,
especially where audited financials are not required for a 506B or a 506C. I don't know if you knew that. It's a good idea and you probably should, but it's not required.
Yeah, it's not. But like, so in my case, I have to, and man, what they are peeling your company back to the bones. But it made me feel confident because, like I got 2024 audit and it came back clean and the report was really good. And it's like, I stack years like that where my books are lining up, everything's kosher. Like that's a good thing and a good sign.
Yeah.
And when you're having a third party company that comes in and does that. So I'm like, you know what, it is expensive, but I'm going to leverage that as I stack on years of like, I have audited financials from 2023 to every year I'm going through it. I think that's going to legitimize things over time and, make it easier and shows that I am running a legit shop. And how I'm choosing to raise capital now, I think I do believe is above board, and I'm fully transparent and going to continue to just grow it.
Has that been a hard sell for your investors, going to the like you're secured but we're unsecured kind of a deal? Has that been scary, or like when you go down and explain to them like, look, we've got all these properties behind the scenes? Is that a tough conversation?
It's a tough conversation when I know they're sophisticated, because if I'm honest, I wouldn't love it. If it was
same, if the roles were reversed, I kind of feel the same way.
So like I'd lead with the option with if it's somebody I know is like, and not that I don't, if they're unsophisticated, because I educate them. I'm like, this is an unsecured, like, I say it straight. This is an unsecured loan to the business, and let them know. But when I know they've like invested in a lot of things and they, like a high net worth individual have done a lot, like if they're sending it to their financial advisor or this and that, it's like, all right, these are your two options and this is why. So I'm very detailed in that because I don't want anyone to think I'm trying to like play them or like it's illegitimate in any way. So I fully detail what that is. And if you have a problem with that or if you want more security, here's your options. And that's why I went through and I paid up front to get participation agreement documentation as well as assignment agreements, where it's like, it's not the only option to invest with me, but this is like, I think the best option and why. But if you're uncomfortable or your team's uncomfortable, we can go this route. So I don't want to push any capital away that I may want, but I try to like kind of paint the full picture, and then it kind of just is what it is from there. But if I have a sense that they're going to be very difficult and they want to do like assignment and they want to like know, and it's like, is the capital worth it at that point to where it's like, I like those are the decisions I'll make on a case by case. And
that's a good way to put it, because all capital is not created equal. We talked, like, we've got extensive episodes in our backlog talking about that, but like you also touched on it earlier, like the word like hard money and private money, it's kind of like this weird blend thing. Like it used to be that hard money was like institutional guys and private lenders were like people like you and me. Now those lines are very blurred, and so people say, well, I'm a private lender, but they've got all this like like these lines of credits from bank and like true lines of credit. Like I know you do it a little bit differently, but like true where the bank is calling the shots and you have to do all of this paperwork and all this stuff. And for me, I went down that road and I'm just like, this is a gigantic pain in the ass. I don't want to deal with that at all.
Well, and let's dive into that. I've kind of classified what I believe real private money is. You have to be controlling your loans and the criteria and everything yourself. If your loan criteria is dictated by outside party, whether it's investors, whether it's institutional, I don't think that's fully private.
I agree. I mean, you're just a broker at that point.
Yeah, like if you like, oh, I got to fit in this to sell it to them, or like, or you're straight up brokering and you're just getting the, like in any other facet, if you're not fully controlling and saying, we will lend on this and we can move this around a little bit. Like if you don't have that full autonomy, then that's not real private lending to me.
Agreed.
And I feel like the majority of the cases of lenders out there nowadays, besides in like the hard money banker group and people like that, I feel like don't fit what we just classified as private lending.
Yep.
Because the true hard money, whether they're institutionally backed or maybe, they are semi-private, but they have tranches to where they have like a fund, but then they also have a warehouse line and they also have, so they have all these different factors. And it's like, they do a small portion of what we would classify, but they only have a small amount of money that they can do that kind of stuff. And then everything else they do is, they're selling off or they're brokering or what have you. That's not real private money to me. So I like to classify. It's almost like you got to really say like, I'm a balance sheet lender.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
And before I feel like you used to be able to say I'm a private lender, but now that doesn't
mean the same.
Same.
Yeah. Well, and I have found too, so like we have turned down lots of capital because the investors are, I don't want to say that the investors we have now are not savvy, but you have investors who know the game, they know what you're doing. And that sounds deceptive. That's not my intent, but they're going to say like, look, I get like you take an arbitrage, you take a spread, you're collecting points. I want 12% and a point.
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm like, I just turned away because I'm like, look, our profit margin, like this is not a charity. This is a business for us. Like, yes, I take a yield spread, but also those points, like that's what keeps the lights on. That's how we keep running. Otherwise, like I wouldn't be doing this and I wouldn't be going through all that.
I agree completely. So my numbers, on a standard loan, I charge 12% at one point. I could charge more than that if it's creative in some way to risk adjust my return. I'm doing something that other lenders might not necessarily do. I might charge more, but my standard terms are 12% in one, and I pay my investors 10%, whether that's through the unsecured loan to me or to the business or participation agreement, like 10%. And I've had people ask for more or want to really dictate, like my criteria is my criteria. You're not going to come and bring in capital and then dictate,
yes,
like, oh, I only want to do loans in Scottsdale. Like, or what, like, hey man, like, this is the loan I have now. You want this one or you don't, or you can invest. And I'm going to do loans in all of Maricopa County based on, cause I have guys that are in the West Valley and it's not as sexy, but they're freaking crushing it and they're doing their thing. So don't tell me I can't lend over there with like, if you want to control that, then you go lend. Then you go lend directly
yourself.
So I think there's something to be said about that. But I think it's the level of like, I don't want to be controlled. I feel like I'm prudent enough in my lending and what I will and won't do that I don't really want to be dictated even a percent by anyone else.
I promise you, it's not worth it. It is not worth it. Last thing I want to focus on, and this was honestly eye-opening for me when you said this a couple weeks ago, but originally when you said I lend at 12 and 1, I was kind of like, oh, you're like, that's not enough. You're like cutting yourself out. And for perspective, like we lend at 3 and 14. And so I was like, dude, you got to charge more. But then you came in and you said, well, like you got to remember that my average loan size is like 600,000 to 800,000, sometimes upward. Like you just talked about a $2 million loan. I've literally never done a $2 million loan. I think our highest loan ever was close to $1 million, like just under.
Yeah.
And most of the time, like our average loan size is 175 to 250,000, so 3 points on that is the exact same thing as 1 point where you're lending.
Yeah.
So,
and I think Arizona's competitive. So if you're charging a lot of points, only time I can get away with more is when I'm being more creative. Like I'm going a little higher LTV for whatever reason, or like structuring it in some creative way. But on a standard deal, it's hard to get over 1. You could maybe get 1.5 sometimes. So 1, to be competitive, but 2, to your point, it's higher. It's higher. You know, even on a $600,000 loan, 1%, that's $6,000. You know, that's, you know, like good chunk in comparison to those smaller markets. Like if you're doing a $110,000 loan, 3% is, you know, 3,000 or something. Like
Right.
so, it's like it's relative.
Well,
Like
it's interesting too. So I know this is the Lender podcast. We obviously haven't talked about Lender, but we recently added a feature in the software where we have a minimum origination fee, because there would be people who lend in Kansas and they're doing a $60,000 loan, but it's not worth it for them to do a $60,000 loan because, you know, two points is $1,200. Like I wouldn't even touch a deal like that, you know? And so now we added a feature where it's like, okay, you can put in 3 points or $2,500. We're going to take whichever is greater, you know? So, but like for you, you'd never even think about that because it wouldn't fly.
It's always relative. And to that point, that also falls with LTV. And like, I feel like we had a private conversation with like, you know, people, they won't lend above 70% or, you know, or above 60% or, you know, how much capital they want. And I'm like, in Arizona, that is a lot of money to expect borrowers to be able to
40% down on that's nuts.
Like let's just do the math. Like if it's $1 million property,
400
and I'm bringing 60%, they got to bring $400,000 plus fees. Like from my experience doing this a few years now, there's not very many borrowers that would have the capital to do that.
Yeah.
So when I first started out and I'm listening to like different podcasts and stuff, and I'm like, okay, I want to be super conservative and this and that. And I had to retrofit it for my market.
Yes.
Because if you're in a cheaper market, you know, and 40% down is only 30 grand.
Yeah. It's not apples to apples.
Fine.
Yeah.
But like when 40% down is 400 grand, it's like, you're going to wash your way out. So I've had to like kind of understand that. And that really affects like, okay, so what is still safe and what it, you know, because I look at it like I try to stress test every loan, and the biggest drop in Arizona ever is in a year span. So, you know, our advantage is
6 months to 12 years.
6 to 12 month loan. So I look, biggest drop ever has been like 18%. And so it's like, I kind of try to weigh my lending on like, could I survive a 20%, you know, drop? And that's in 1 year. And that was like in 07 or 08, like during that time period. Everything else, if you take that out, the biggest drop has been like 9%.
Right.
So I'm like, I underwrite to 20%. And it's like, what am I going to do? Apocalypse happens essentially, like 08 and everything, the whole government and all this stuff is down. What am I going to do? And that's where we start talking about my creative solutions. Do I sell it to another investor? How can I get out? Do I finish it and have my wife sell it? She's an agent. But that's how I kind of reverse engineer and risk profile my things. And it's like, all right, I can lend to X amount. I can go up to maybe 75% or 75% of the ARV on this, which is higher than what some lenders would assume. But based on these numbers, that would work. And if it went down 15%, I should still be able to get my capital out, considering Arizona's a non-judicial foreclosure state. I can take over it in 90 days. So I'm kind of like factoring in all that in. And that's how I reverse engineer to assess my risk.
I love it. I love it. Do you ever see yourself like lending outside of Arizona? Or are you just Arizona forever? And
I started out in multiple markets, and I've kind of reverted to Arizona because I have such a moat. Like I've been listening to a lot of Warren Buffett, and then even like Alex Hormozy and niche down. And what's your, you know, like what's your one thing? Doubling down on that. And I'm like, I only have so much capital. Like my balance sheet is approaching 10 million right now. I can get that out in Arizona easily. Why would I lend anywhere else?
Agreed.
So, you know, I have some select borrowers that I've worked with for 4 or 5 years now before I even had my actual company that, you know, I would still consider lending to and doing some one-offs. I would only do that with my actual personal capital, not like investors. But so I'll still consider some of that because I've been with them for so long. But like the core of my business is going to be here. And I don't see that changing until the market tells me it needs to change. And even then, do I consider small balance commercial? Do I consider more development? Because development's big. Most of my stuff's just been fix and flip. But I think there's other things that I can expand on in this market to where I think it will be hard pressed for me to ever leave.
And I agree with that, unless like, you hear of like huge lenders who got like $150 million balance sheets, okay, maybe that's different where you do need to start branching out to other surrounding states. But, I've got one person in mind as I say this, he's got, 10, $15 million balance sheet. And he's like, I've tapped my market. I'm like, have you really though? Like, I don't care if you've got a population of like 10,000 or 100,000, like think it's still about like how many, even just single family homes there are in a population of 20,000 people, and you really don't think you can deploy 10 or $15 million? Like,
I guess my question to you, is it harder in cheaper markets?
I don't think so. Cause I still have that same mindset. So for example, like, my own backyard is like around 60 or $70,000 population. And I still don't think, like, there's a lot of real estate investors and I feel like I know a lot of them, but I also know a lot of people have no idea who I am. Like, we still get a lot of new people calling us and they're like, I've never heard of you before, So like, and on top of that, like there's always this cycle, right? Like people flip for a couple of years, then get tired of it, they move out, and then like a new generation kind of comes in. So like, I see myself lending for the foreseeable future.
Well, and I think what people who are getting into lending have to realize is when you start expanding markets, you're adding risk.
Yes.
There's no other way to cut it.
Yep.
You're adding risk.
This stuff you just don't know,
there's things you can do to mitigate the risk. So I'm not saying it's not a good idea, depending on your situation, how big you are, et cetera. But, there's something to be really building your moat in one market and then strategically expanding when it really does make sense. And I agree. I think the only reason it could ever make sense is we've gotten very, very large.
Yes.
If you've gotten very, very large, it's probably hard to deploy $100 million in a super competitive market. But I bet there's people doing it pretty easily still. So.
I think so too. Yeah, I agree. Devon, wrapping up here, I want to be conscious of your time because we're coming up on an hour-ish. What's next for Devon? What do you see in the next 10 years? Are you trying to build this massive like empire, or just kind of keep like a small legacy for you and your family? You also talked about raising more capital and someday maybe getting to 50 million. Like what's kind of the 10-year vision?
I would say I can see my business getting to 50 million one day.
Okay.
But I want, at any point in time, I always want to be the biggest investor. So some people want to, take their cash out or whatever. Like I want to deploy more of my own capital. I see 42 Solutions and private lending as a business, but as my own personal investment vehicle. So, when I don't have to take anybody else's capital, I can make, annualized about 14 to 16% annualized on my dollars.
Yeah.
And from experience, investing myself, investing in other bigger projects, there's not many things that are generating 14 to 16%.
Right.
And I've even stress tested it. So even net expenses and taxes, because tax hit running the business, like I think you could operate at 10 to 12-ish.
Pretty lean.
Net, net taxes in business. So like, and then that's not even adding on the juice I can squeeze with like strategic second position loans, because I'm comfortable with doing that on, stabilized assets. So there's things I can do to so I think net of expenses and taxes to generate a 10 to 12% cash on your capital. From my experience, there's not many vehicles that can do that.
Agreed.
So I want to deploy more and more of my own capital into the business, and be the biggest investor and spend what I need in my family, but reinvest aggressively. So like kind of build my own Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, but in private lending.
Ooh, I like that.
That's how I kind of envision it. Like I'm gonna have my own private lending Berkshire, and build that out. And if God willing, I get to 50 million, the compound, it's going to keep growing because the compounding is ridiculous at that point.
Oh yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Cross that bridge when we get there.
I don't see myself wanting to get beyond 50 million, but if I get to 50 million,
that's a good problem to have. Yeah.
I don't know what's going to stop it from growing at that point. So that's and if that takes 20, 30, 40, however long, but also it's a legacy business. So I want to teach my kids this business. So I listened to all your episodes, and shout out Finley Capital Podcast. I listen to all their stuff, Private Lender Podcast. So I've heard you and knew of you a long time, and like it's hard to sell a private lending shop, essentially, to your point. But I want to do the things where it is sellable one day, potentially. But more importantly, I can pass it down to my kids and they can decide they want to run it or hire like a COO or somebody to run it operationally. So right now, 42 Solutions is really attached to my name and my brand, and that's intentional because I have brand capital and leverage to grow it here. But I want it to grow into its own, to where it can stand on its own legs. And then eventually I can teach my kids what I do and they could do it. Or if they don't want to do it, I don't want to hand them over a business that they don't want. Hire someone and pick up, clip off coupons every month, and you just make big decisions when it's time to make decisions on the operator. So I see it as a legacy company that can grow to pretty large numbers when you start talking generations.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Devon, you're the man. Thanks for coming on the podcast, man. This has been awesome. For everybody else that's listening, I forgot to put your book, through your book.
Yeah. My book, I've written two. The first one is It All Adds Up, and my second one is Real Estate Side Hustle. I talk a lot about private lending, especially in the second one, and how to kind of build it out. And that's what's awesome. You can kind of retrofit how you want to do this. But yeah, those books are awesome. I think they're really for high net worth individuals who are trying to figure out how to invest passively. And I say that in quotations because I don't really believe in passive, how society says passive.
Agreed.
You have to define, like for me, when I was playing, sorry, this is another tangent, but when I was playing, passive to me meant 5 to 10 hours a week. So I think the issue with passive is people think that means nothing.
Yep.
And I don't believe in that. There's like, if you think you're going to invest or do something and and you don't do anything, it's not a real thing. But you can build things so I talk about how to do it in single family, how to invest and underwrite syndication deals and do it, and how to do it in private lending, to where you can, while I was playing in the NFL, worried about sacking Tom Brady, I was able to do these investment strategies, and it would take about 5 to 10 hours a week. And if whatever you do for a living, if you can do that, if you have at least 5 to 10 hours, you can buy single family properties if you would like. You can invest into larger deals, syndications, or you can become a private lender at a smaller scale, obviously.
So good. I love it. Okay, everybody, go check out Devon's book. Devon, as always, thanks for being here. This is a blast.
Thanks for having
me. To do it again. So, okay, until next week, this is the Lender Podcast. We'll catch you then. Thanks for listening.